that was no dog. That was too big to be a dog. That thing was bigger than me.
What lurks in the remote reaches of Pelican Valley, where ancient thermal forces meet untamed wilderness? In the summer of 2023, two veteran Yellowstone rangers encountered something that would shatter their understanding of the natural world. Their experience, meticulously documented yet officially denied, opens a door into Yellowstone's darkest mysteries. Could these vast, isolated spaces harbor entities that defy conventional explanation? As the shadows lengthen and steam rises from countless thermal vents, 5 extraordinary encounters begin to paint a picture of America's most enigmatic national park. Starting with a creature that walked like a man, but moved with impossible grace through the gathering dusk of Pelican Valley. The Pelican Valley Giant, July 2023. In the vast expanse of Yellowstone's eastern wilderness, where ancient forces still bubble beneath the Earth's crust, Pelican Valley stands as a testament to nature's untamed spirit. Stretching across nearly 20 square miles of pristine backcountry, this remote valley remains one of the park's most isolated regions, accessible only to those willing to venture far from the well-worn tourist paths. Here, where grizzly bears prowl through shoulder-high grass and elk herds drift like shadows across mist-shrouded meadows, the boundary between the known and unknown grows remarkably thin. The valley's reputation for high bear activity has led to strict access restrictions, creating an almost mythical aura around its boundaries, where even seasoned rangers speak in hushed tones about what lurks in its deeper reaches. It was against this backdrop that 2 veteran park rangers found themselves conducting their routine patrol in late July 2023. Their mission that day seemed straightforward enough: checking research camera traps set up by the wildlife biology team to monitor elk and bison migration patterns. Such tasks formed the backbone of their daily duties, alongside ensuring no adventurous hikers strayed into restricted areas or approached the valley's numerous thermal features. The summer had been particularly active, with a grizzly sow and 2 cubs recently spotted near Pelican Creek, adding an extra layer of vigilance to their work. As the sun began its slow descent behind the lodgepole pines, casting long shadows across the valley floor, neither ranger could have anticipated how their ordinary day was about to transform into one of the park's most compelling mysteries. As the summer sun cast its final rays across Pelican Valley, what began as routine patrol would soon challenge everything these rangers understood about their wilderness domain. The first sign came through the crisp evening air, heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing from across the shallow river. Both rangers instinctively froze, their years of experience instantly recognizing something unusual in the rhythm. Unlike the 4-beat pattern of elk or the lumbering gait of a grizzly, these footsteps carried an almost human cadence, yet heavier, more purposeful. The sound grew closer, accompanied by the subtle crack of branches and rustle of undergrowth. As they stood motionless, their trained ears tracked the movement, estimating it at roughly 70 yards away, behind a dense cluster of willows on the opposite bank. When the figure emerged, time seemed to stop. At first glance, their minds struggled to categorize what stood before them. A dark silhouette that rose well above the surrounding vegetation, easily reaching 7 or 8 feet in height. The creature moved with an unsettling grace that defied its massive size, each step deliberate and controlled. Unlike a bear's awkward bipedal stance, this being's upright posture appeared natural, almost regal, as it surveyed its domain. The rangers watched, transfixed, as it turned its broad shoulders toward them, acknowledging their presence with an almost casual glance. In the fading light, details emerged that would forever haunt their memories. The entity's muscular frame bore no resemblance to any known wildlife species, its proportions simultaneously familiar yet alien. Broad shoulders tapered to long, powerful arms that hung well below where human arms would end. Its fur appeared dark, possibly black or deep brown in the dimming light, but it was the creature's fluid movement that truly set it apart. Each motion spoke of raw power held in check, like a predator comfortable in its absolute dominance of the landscape. The face, briefly visible in profile, showed features that seemed to blend primate in something altogether unknown. The encounter lasted mere minutes, but its impact left both rangers rooted in place long after the being disappeared into the tree line. Their collective training, representing decades of wildlife experience, offered no explanation for what they'd witnessed. The younger ranger instinctively reached for his radio before his partner stopped him with a warning gesture. Both understood the futility of trying to report something that defied classification. As twilight deepened around them, they exchanged knowing looks, silently acknowledging that their understanding of Yellowstone's wilderness had just been fundamentally altered. Their world, once neatly categorized into known species and behaviors, now held shadows they'd never anticipated. After the initial shock subsided, the rangers knew they needed to document whatever evidence remained before nightfall claimed their extraordinary encounter. Moving with practiced caution, they crossed the shallow river to examine the spot where the creature had stood, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. What they discovered exceeded their wildest expectations. A series of clearly defined impressions in the muddy riverbank, each print measuring well beyond human scale, yet bearing distinctly humanoid characteristics. The rangers meticulously photographed the tracks using their department-issued camera, placing equipment beside them for scale reference. However, when they attempted to access this crucial evidence weeks later, they encountered a puzzling void in the records. The footage from that specific camera trap had vanished from the database, while adjacent units retained their data. A senior staff biologist's evasive response to their inquiries only deepened the mystery, suggesting a pattern of institutional silence regarding such phenomena. Their detailed field notes, carefully written that evening, became their only tangible proof of an encounter that challenged everything they thought they knew about Yellowstone's wildlife. In the shadowy world of Park Service protocol, some truths remain whispered rather than written, passed down through generations of rangers who've witnessed the inexplicable. The official response to the Pelican Valley incident followed a familiar pattern of institutional silence, wrapped in layers of bureaucratic procedure. When the rangers attempted to file their report, subtle pressures and unspoken understandings guided them toward vague terminology. Unidentified large mammal became the accepted phrase, buried in routine wildlife observations. Yet behind this official veneer, veteran staff members shared knowing looks and whispered stories of similar encounters stretching back decades. A particularly seasoned ranger, nearing retirement, confided over coffee about a hidden archive of irregular observations dating to the park's earliest days. These unofficial acknowledgments, passed down like folklore among long-serving staff, suggested a deeper institutional awareness of phenomena that defied conventional explanation, carefully maintained beneath the surface of Yellowstone's public image. As the echoes of the Pelican Valley encounter faded into park legend, another mysterious incident was already unfolding near Mammoth Hot Springs. Here, where ancient thermal features paint the landscape in otherworldly hues, a late-night maintenance routine would soon add another layer to Yellowstone's growing collection of inexplicable encounters. The Mammoth Entity, late 2023. Mammoth Hot Springs stands as one of Yellowstone's most surreal landscapes, where mineral-rich water cascades over terraced travertine formations, creating an ever-changing canvas of otherworldly colors. Steam rises perpetually from countless vents and pools, casting ghostly shadows that dance across the ancient limestone deposits, while the constant hiss of escaping gases creates an almost hypnotic ambient soundtrack that makes even veteran park staff question their senses at times. Behind the tourist-facing facade lies a network of restricted maintenance areas and staff-only facilities, including a small workshop tucked discreetly behind the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel. Here, maintenance workers move through their routines in relative isolation, especially during night shifts when the park's public spaces fall silent. These back-of-house zones, largely unknown to visitors, form a shadow ecosystem of service corridors and utility spaces where staff members quietly keep the park's infrastructure running. Through the sulfurous mist that particular night, something waited in those hidden spaces, something that would test the boundaries between known wildlife and inexplicable mystery. At 9:30 p.m., the maintenance worker was finishing routine repairs in the workshop when the first anomaly manifested, a sound like shifting gravel near the building's corner. Different from the familiar rustling of nocturnal wildlife or the distant hiss of thermal vents, these movements carried a deliberate, almost calculated quality. The rhythm suggested something massive yet methodical, moving with an awareness that set it apart from the usual nighttime visitors. Upon investigating with their flashlight, the worker discovered a figure crouched near the building's foundation that defied conventional explanation. Initially mistaken for a black bear, the entity's proportions quickly dispelled that assumption. Its form appeared elongated, with a glossy, dark gray surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When the beam caught its surface, the texture appeared neither fully fur nor skin, but something unsettlingly between. The true shock came when the figure rose to its full height, well over 6 feet, with limbs just slightly too long for human proportions. Its movement defied natural physics, displaying an almost liquid grace as it retreated into the darkness beyond the workshop. Most disturbing was the complete silence of its departure. Despite its considerable size, not a single sound marked its exit, as if it had simply melted into the thermal mist that perpetually shroud Mammoth's hidden corners. The sulfurous night air carried more than steam that evening, as whispers of similar encounters began surfacing from other staff members, each adding another piece to an increasingly complex puzzle. A plumber working late shifts near Old Faithful Inn reported witnessing similar figures darting between steam vents, their forms partially obscured by the perpetual geothermal haze. Housekeeping staff shared accounts of encountering inexplicable shadows in the employee quarters, always near areas where the building's old pipes carried heated water from the thermal springs. Each story echoed elements of the workshop encounter: the unusual fluidity of movement, the unsettling silence, and the distinctly non-human proportions. Analysis of these sightings revealed a striking pattern. Nearly every encounter occurred within close proximity to active thermal features. The maintenance supervisor, a 20-year veteran of the park, noted how reports increased during periods of heightened geothermal activity. Staff members began mapping these incidents, discovering clusters around specific hot springs and steam vents, suggesting these entities might be drawn to or somehow utilizing Yellowstone's vast underground thermal network. During off-hours gatherings at the employee cafeteria, conversations increasingly turned to these unexplained encounters. A retired ranger shared stories from the 1970s describing similar entities, while current staff members quietly compared notes about areas they instinctively avoided during night shifts. Though never officially acknowledged, these discussions revealed an unspoken understanding among Mammoth's workforce. Certain areas of the park harbored mysteries that defied conventional explanation, especially after dark. As winter descended upon Yellowstone, bringing long nights and ethereal steam clouds, another visitor would discover that the park's mysteries weren't limited to staff areas, nor did they confine themselves to the cover of darkness. The Ghostlight Tourist, February 2023. Winter transforms Yellowstone into an alien landscape, where billowing clouds of steam create ghostly curtains against pristine snowfields, and temperatures plunge well below zero. During this harsh season, most of the park becomes accessible only by snow coach or snowmobile, creating an atmosphere of profound isolation. The combination of extreme cold and constant geothermal activity produces surreal conditions. Frozen trees encased in mineral-laden frost stand like sentinels beside steaming pools, while the very air seems to crystallize, making even familiar landmarks appear otherworldly. It was into this winter wonderland that our witness arrived in late February 2023, having secured a coveted reservation at the Old Faithful Snow Lodge. The journey from West Yellowstone had already set an unsettling tone, with their snow coach driver sharing unusually serious tales about rogue geothermal vents and mysteriously collapsing roads. As darkness settled over the geyser basin, the visitor found themselves drawn to Old Faithful's regular eruptions, hoping to capture the famous geyser against the star-filled winter sky, unaware that they were about to encounter phenomena far more mysterious than rising steam. The first hint of strangeness appeared as a subtle flicker in the western darkness, where ancient thermal forces meet the winter night. At 8:30 p.m., as the visitor consulted their phone for Old Faithful's next predicted eruption, something caught their attention near the western edge of the upper geyser basin. Through the crystalline winter air, a peculiar light source emerged, not the harsh beam of a flashlight or the familiar glow of park lighting, but something altogether different. The anomaly manifested as an orange orb, roughly the size of a beach ball, hovering approximately 4 feet above the snow-covered ground, its glow pulsing with an almost organic rhythm. As they observed this inexplicable phenomenon, their phone began exhibiting bizarre behavior. The device's clock display flickered erratically, jumping between different times without pattern or reason. This technological disruption wasn't limited to simple malfunction. It seemed to respond to the orb's proximity, with the interference intensifying whenever the light source drew closer to their position. The temperature around them noticeably dropped, creating a pocket of even colder air that defied the already frigid winter night. The orb's movement patterns challenged all natural explanations. It traversed the space with deliberate intelligence, pausing at regular intervals as if studying its surroundings. When the witness attempted to approach, the light executed a series of impossible maneuvers, accelerating instantaneously and changing direction at angles that defied physics. Most remarkably, it maintained perfect stability despite the gusting winter winds that whipped snow across the geyser basin, suggesting some form of controlled propulsion rather than natural phenomena. In the frozen silence of that February night, this display of impossible light would prove to be merely the beginning of a series of increasingly strange encounters. The morning after the sighting, a cross-country skiing guide casually mentioned local legends about ghost lights near the Firehole River, her knowing smile suggesting familiarity with similar reports. Further conversations with park staff revealed a pattern. Multiple employees had witnessed identical orange orbs during winter months, particularly in areas where thermal activity breached the snow cover. Most notably, a veteran ranger working the night shift admitted to documenting several such sightings in his personal logbook, though they never made it into official reports. Research into historical accounts painted an even more compelling picture. Early park records from the 1800s contained references to phantom lanterns that defied explanation, often described in remarkably similar terms to the recent sighting. Native American traditions spoke of spirit lights that danced above the thermal areas, believed to be manifestations of the land's powerful energies. These historical parallels suggested a phenomenon as old as the park itself, consistently observed across generations despite changing technologies and cultural frameworks. Most intriguing was the geographic correlation between sighting locations and the park's subsurface thermal network. After mapping multiple reported encounters, a clear pattern emerged. The orange orbs appeared most frequently along known fault lines and in areas of intense geothermal activity. The Upper Geyser Basin, where this most recent sighting occurred, sat at the intersection of several major thermal features, suggesting a possible connection between these mysterious lights and Yellowstone's volatile underground energies. As spring thawed the winter's grip on Yellowstone, the mysteries would take an even darker turn, manifesting in a form that challenged not just understanding, but the very nature of what lurked in the park's remote corners. The Dogman of Tower Roosevelt, June 2023. As June drew to a close, an unusually severe storm system descended upon Yellowstone's northern reaches. Dark clouds rolled across Tower Roosevelt like a celestial army, while scattered lightning illuminated the ancient pines in stark, flash-frozen moments. The air carried an electric charge that set every ranger's instincts on edge, as thunder echoed through the valleys with unusual intensity. Even the wildlife seemed to sense something beyond ordinary weather, with elk herds moving restlessly against the darkening horizon. For the patrolling ranger, this was meant to be a routine check of the Blacktail Plateau Drive area, a task performed countless times before. Taking a little-used service road that paralleled the main tourist route, they drove deeper into the gathering storm's embrace. The familiar smell of wet pine filled the vehicle as raindrops began their percussive dance on the roof, while wind-whipped branches created shifting shadows that seemed to reach for the patrol car with spectral fingers. Lightning split the sky again, and in its brief illumination, something moved at the forest edge that would forever change how this ranger viewed Yellowstone's wilderness. The ranger's first glimpse came during a brilliant flash of lightning, revealing a dark silhouette crouched behind a cluster of lodgepole pines, roughly 50 yards away. Initial instincts suggested a bear, but something about the figure's proportions immediately triggered alarm bells in the ranger's mind. The form appeared larger than a wolf, but carried itself with an unsettling awareness that spoke of neither ursine nor lupine behavior. Against professional training, the ranger found themselves frozen, hand hovering above their radio. When the next lightning strike illuminated the scene, the entity's true form defied all rational explanation. Standing upright, it reached well over 6 feet tall, its frame distinctly canine, yet impossibly bipedal. The creature's head bore the unmistakable profile of a wolf, elongated snout, pointed ears, and eyes that reflected an unnatural intelligence. Its musculature suggested immense power, with shoulders broader than any natural predator, while its arms hung longer than any known canid species, ending in what appeared to be hand-like appendages with visible claws. Most disturbing was the being's behavior. It displayed none of the typical fight-or-flight responses common to wildlife encounters. Instead, it observed the ranger with calculated interest, its head cocked slightly as if assessing the situation. When it moved, it transitioned seamlessly between quadrupedal and bipedal stances, demonstrating an impossible agility that defied its massive size. Then, just before vanishing into the storm-swept darkness, it rose to its full height and turned, offering what seemed like a deliberate, almost acknowledging glance over its shoulder. A deafening thunderclap shattered the moment, and when the next lightning flash came, the creature had vanished. But its impact on Yellowstone's growing catalog of mysteries was only beginning to unfold. The ranger's extensive wildlife experience rendered standard explanations impossible. While bears occasionally stand upright and wolves possess remarkable agility, no known species combine bipedal mobility with distinctly canine features. The creature's size exceeded the largest recorded gray wolves by a significant margin, while its controlled movements and apparent intelligence suggested something beyond simple animal behavior. Most puzzling was its seamless transition between stances, a physical feat impossible for any documented North American predator. Historical research revealed a pattern of similar sightings stretching back through Yellowstone's recorded history, with early park documents containing vague references to upright wolves dating to the 1880s. Among current park staff, the incident sparked a quiet wave of similar admissions. Rangers and maintenance workers began sharing their own encounters, always in hushed tones and away from official channels. A senior staff member revealed an unofficial log of anomalous wildlife observations that contained dozens of similar reports, all carefully buried under mundane classifications. These accounts, spanning generations and various locations within the park, shared remarkably consistent details despite their observers' varying backgrounds, suggesting a phenomenon as persistent as it was inexplicable. Thunder still echoed across Yellowstone's vast expanse as summer progressed, but the next mystery would transcend physical encounters entirely, venturing into realms of time and space themselves. Lucy's time slip, August 2023. Fairy Falls Trail in August stands as one of Yellowstone's most deceptively ordinary paths, winding through lodgepole pine forest toward the Grand Prismatic Springs rainbow waters. Lucy began her solitary hike at 7 a.m., seeking to avoid the tourist crowds, with only the distant clicks of a departing photographer's camera breaking the morning stillness. The trail appeared misleadingly simple, yet something about the forest felt different that morning. The pines seemed to crowd closer than usual, their shadows deeper, more purposeful, while an unusual stillness hung in the air like a held breath. The atmosphere carried none of the typical morning bustle of wildlife. Even the usual birdsong had fallen silent, as if nature itself was withdrawing from what was about to unfold. In the eerie quiet of that August morning, Lucy would discover that in Yellowstone, time itself could become as fluid as the thermal waters that shaped its landscape. The first signs of anomaly manifested through technology. Lucy's fully charged phone began to malfunction, its screen flickering erratically while the clock display jumped between random times. A low, persistent humming filled the air, reminiscent of distant electrical transformers, but somehow more organic, more alive. Through breaks in the pine canopy, she glimpsed what appeared to be a silvery, oval-shaped object hovering motionless in the morning sky. Unlike any aircraft, it maintained perfect stillness before executing impossible movements, instant directional changes with no transition, vanishing and reappearing as if mocking the laws of physics. What followed defied rational explanation. The humming ceased abruptly, plunging the forest into an unnatural silence. When Lucy checked her watch, it displayed 10:11 a.m. More than 2 hours had vanished, though her subjective experience suggested only minutes had passed. Her phone, suddenly functional again, showed a missed call from 9:15 a.m., a technological impossibility during its apparent malfunction. The time displacement left her with a profound sense of disorientation, as if she'd briefly stepped outside the normal flow of reality, accompanied by an inexplicable draining fatigue that would linger for days. As shadows lengthened across Yellowstone's thermal landscape, Lucy's experience would join a growing constellation of anomalies that suggested the park's mysteries extended far beyond the physical realm. The aftermath manifested both physically and psychologically. Lucy experienced persistent headaches and an unusual fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to cure. Other hikers reported similar symptoms after encountering anomalies near thermal features, particularly around the Fairy Falls area. When a park employee was quietly consulted about these effects, he revealed that certain areas of the park were known to cause electronic malfunctions and temporal distortions, though such information never made it into official reports. The connection between these symptoms and the park's geothermal activity suggested something more complex than simple electromagnetic interference. Cross-referencing Lucy's experience with historical records exposed an intriguing pattern. Similar accounts of missing time and UFO sightings clustered around Yellowstone's major thermal basins, often accompanied by reports of the same humming sound and electronic disturbances. Native American traditions spoke of places where time flowed differently, particularly near what they considered sacred thermal features. These correlations, combined with ongoing staff observations, hinted at a phenomenon as old as the park itself, one that perhaps found its source in the vast network of geothermal energies flowing beneath Yellowstone's surface. From the towering figure in Pelican Valley to the time slips near Fairy Falls, Yellowstone's mysteries continue to challenge our understanding of what lurked beyond the boundaries of the known world. These 5 accounts, each distinct yet intriguingly interconnected, suggest patterns that can't be dismissed as mere coincidence or misidentification. If you've experienced something inexplicable, add your voice to this growing tapestry of testimony, for only through shared experiences can we begin to unravel the true nature of what dwells in these ancient thermal lands.